Hello and welcome to another What's New in Zimbra webinar. Today we're going to be looking at the ABQ service. So these webinars are essentially looking at some of the new features that we've introduced into the 8.8 Zimbra collaboration product. So I'm your presenter today. My name's Andrew Shingler, and we're going to take a brief overview of the ABQ service. If you do have any questions, please put that in the Q&A section. I will try and answer the questions once we've got to the end of the presentation. So the ABQ service was something that we actually introduced in version 8.8.9 of Zimbra collaboration. And ABQ, in fact, stands for Allow Block Quarantine, if you weren't aware of that. So ABQ is actually a feature of the ActiveSync protocol. So it's a subset of essentially the Zimbra mobile feature that's available within the professional edition. And it gives you, or gives the administrator, granular access in terms of controlling mobile devices that connect to the Zimbra server. So that would include smartphones or tablet devices, or essentially anything that is using the ActiveSync protocol to connect to the server. So that might include Outlook. So Outlook does in fact support ActiveSync as a protocol to synchronize to the server. And what it is essentially a preemptive security feature. So it acts upon the first time a device connects to the server. It's to allow the admin to ensure that only authorized devices can actually be allowed to synchronize with the server. So the administrator or an automated process will go through a number of checks to say, yes, this device can be allowed to synchronize with the server, or no, I'm going to block that device. It allows the administrator obviously to keep track of all these mobile devices that are in their network and perform different actions, including sort of blocking or quarantining or allowing them through. In the current version of ABQ, it's only available through CLI tools. There is an initiative to provide web-based capability or web-based tools, which will be in a future release of Zimbra. So that would typically then be embedded into the admin console. So it comprises of three components within the server itself. So you have a device control list. So this is the ABQ list, and it holds the information about the devices that are allowed to connect to the server. And this is basically the NG mobile engine that's used for the Zimbra mobile setup. So devices can be added to the device control list via the CLI using their device ID. So typically any device, mobile, smartphone, etc., has a unique device ID that is presented to the server. Then there's an authorization engine. So the engine is essentially taking care of checking those devices against this device control list and setting their ABQ status to the appropriate value, so be it blocked or allowed within there. And then you have a set of CLI tools to run the various control and administrative commands against the ABQ service. So using the CLI tools, again, it's currently working at a sort of a system-wide level. So it impacts all users across the entire estate of your Zimbra service. So it's not defined at a class of service or a domain level, but you can, from the CLI, you can display the list of control devices. You can display all devices that have been put into quarantine. So typically a device would go into the quarantine list on the first initiation of the synchronization. So as an admin, you can find out, well, which devices have tried to connect to the Zimbra server or the Zimbra mailboxes, and then you can make a decision as to whether you want to allow them or whether you're going to block those devices. You can actually add one or more devices to that device control list. So you can pre-allocate a list of devices or known devices that you expect to be connecting to the service. So it avoids the need necessarily for the administrator to do that manual process of allowing the devices through. So if you have a known set of devices that you give out to your employees, for example, then you can predefine all those devices within your ABQ list, and they will automatically be allowed through to synchronize with the server. And the admin the CLI tool will obviously let you to sort of move devices between quarantined, allowed, or blocked in terms of being able to synchronize with the Zimbra server. There's also some dummy data. So initially, when the user tries to synchronize a device, you don't just want to send a sort of a block status, or you don't want to just sort of not allow them to go through that process. So we have essentially a virtual mailbox where dummy emails are sent to the device while the device is put on hold for authorization. So it will send them data to say that they're either in a quarantine situation or they've been blocked. The predefined dummy email messages are synchronized to the device itself. Currently, they're not customizable, so they are using sort of standard text that's embedded within the code itself. But again, something that we want to be able to introduce is to allow you to create customizable messages that get sent to the user. And this is essentially just to give the end user some information about what's going on, so they don't feel that something is just broken and it's not working. They do get some information that says, you know, you've been put into a quarantine status, and the admin will release your connection as soon as they have gone through the block list or the quarantine list. So in terms of enabling ABQ, it doesn't require much setup, because as long as you're using the NG mobile modules within Zimbra service, it's essentially already in there and running. But then we need to set up in the manner in which we want devices to be authorized onto the platform. So there are 4 possible modes. So there's permissive, interactive, strict, and disabled. So permissive essentially means that devices will be allowed to connect to the Zimbra server. They will go through the various checks, but they won't be put into a quarantine or a block status. So it's almost the same way that it runs today. It will allow the connection to happen, and there'll be no blocking or quarantine that's done in a permissive mode. There's interactive, where it requires the admin to actually take some action to move devices out of a quarantine status and either block them or allow them. And there's also strict. So strict is typically where you predefine a list of devices, and it will then only allow devices that you've predefined within the ABQ list to connect to the service. Everything else will simply be blocked. And then the last one is disabled. So disabled, essentially, there's no action going on in terms of the ABQ service, and it's not even going through the pre-connection authorization or checks to see the device coming in itself. So that's effectively turning it off. So what we'll do here is I've set ABQ mode. So again, I'm using the CLI command line here to put it into interactive mode. So this means that as an administrator, I will need to go and release devices that come and connect onto the server, because initially they'll be put into a quarantine mode. So once I've set that up, I can go to my device. So in this instance, I'm using an iPad here. I'm connecting to the Zimbra server. So when you connect via ActiveSync from an iPhone or an iPad or any sort of ActiveSync device, you would typically you would select the Exchange protocol here to set that up. Then I input my my details on my server, so my email address, my server address. This is just a demo server that I've used here to take these screenshots, the username and password, and just giving it a description here. So once I've gone that, I just go through the standard process of setting up an ActiveSync connection to the Zimbra server. I will then get this notification on my device. So you can see here that it says that there's a mobile security policy in effect, and I've been put into a quarantine status. And it indicates there that if you need to find out any more information about that, then you just need to contact your system administrator if you feel that you need to sort of push the process along. I mean, the admin will actually be, or can actually be, notified that a device is put into a quarantine mode, so there's an automated process that he would be, and he would get an announcement that a new device has been put into quarantine mode. But if you need to go back to your system admin to push that through, then you've got that notification there. So as the admin, I can now go into the CLI. I can list out devices, so I can now see this new device that's connected to the service, which is my iPad in this instance. It's currently in a status of quarantine. So as an admin, all I need to do now is set that status to allow. So I'm using the CLI here to put it into an allowed status. Obviously, I could put that into a block status as well if I didn't want that device to connect onto my server. So once the admin has set it into an allowed status, I would immediately then be able to synchronize my device. So you can see there's a test email that I've sent through that. So my device is now fully set up and is working via ActiveSync against the Zimbra server. So there are a few other features within ABQ, which I've kind of touched on earlier. So devices can be automatically allowed from a predefined list. So if you know all the devices, if you're supplying your end users with known devices, you can pre-allow all those devices. So they wouldn't have to go through that quarantining process. So again, it's really sort of allowing you to sort of fully automate the process in a situation where you've got known devices. The other thing that you could do is you can actually link a device to a specific account. Now, again, this is a security feature because potentially if you don't link it with a specific account, it means that if a device comes in and you allow it to synchronize to a mailbox, they've been approved and allowed to connect to that mailbox, but they could then potentially go and set up another account against the same server and still be allowed to connect. So it wouldn't go through the quarantining process because you would have already allowed that device through. Whereas if you want sort of even more fine-grained control, what you can do is you can align a device to a specific account, and that means that only that device can connect to that specific mailbox. So again, giving you sort of quite fine-grained control. And the admin can automatically be notified of quarantine devices, so that within the CLI, and if you look at the administration guide, there are different intervals where the admin can be notified of accounts that have been put into a quarantine status, and then they can go and release those devices using the CLI commands that I've shown here. So typically that would be in a situation where you've got ABQ set in an interactive mode. So how do you get started? I say it's pretty simple. It's already embedded into the NG mobile module, so there's no additional modules or repositories that you need to go and load. It's really just a case of running the CLI command to put it into the mode that you want. In terms of versions, as I said previously, it just needs to be 8.8.9 or above, which is when we introduced the ABQ service. And for a full list of all the commands that are available with the ABQ, if you go to the admin guide, there is a section specifically around ABQ. So that's really all I have to go through today. I hope that was a useful sort of exercise in terms of giving you a brief overview of what the ABQ service is. If you do have any questions, as I say, you can always reach out to your partners or to Zimbra, and we'd be happy to help you. As I say, there's quite a lot of documentation around this, and it's available if you needed to test it on our trial download, so you'd be able to run up a demo service and just use this ABQ service in trial mode as well, so you can run some demo tests as well. So thank you for attending today. I hope that was useful, and I'll speak to you on the next webinar. Thank you very much.